Hey guys, so it's been an extremely long time, so thanks for sticking with me. But first I'd like to say that I'm back and there are many things I'd like to do with you guys and show you. And starting in the next couple weeks, we're going to figure out a day that I can produce videos and get them uploaded to YouTube on a weekly basis. That day will probably be Friday or Wednesday. I will figure out the day and I'll put it at the end of this video. But anyway, in front of you, a lot of you I'm sure know right off the bat, that is one of the most famous passenger locomotives ever built. That is the Pennsylvania Railroad K4. The Pennsylvania Railroad started building these in 1914. 425 in total were built. These were used primarily for passenger service, but sometimes could be seen pulling short freight trains towards the end of steam. Attempts were made during its life, starting in 1914. During its life, there were attempts made to replace it. The replacement locomotives that they came up with were the K5, which they only built 2 of. And although it was sort of successful, it was not good. It couldn't beat the K4. And also the T1 locomotive. Diesels finally replaced it in the 50s, and ever since then, there were only 2 preserved, number 1361 and 3750, I believe. And one is sitting in a pile of metal right now because they were trying to refurbish it, the 1361, and that has not gone too well. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to this. If you do know the answer to this question, please put it in the comments. Why did, in 1988 or 87, when they restored the K4 to operate in condition, why couldn't they operate it? What was wrong with it? I know they ran it on like 3 excursions and then they stopped. That was it. It never even made it to the horseshoe curve, I don't think. But if somebody knows the answer to why they had to stop running the engine, please put it in the comments section. But anyway, let's get on to the detail of this locomotive. And I'll show you some things that I normally show, and we'll go from there. Alright, so this locomotive was produced by Broadway Limited Imports early 2013, I believe January and March. This is from the first run of them, engine number 1139. And a couple of things to take note of. They did a great job on this locomotive. The entire body is die-cast, so it can really pull, but also if you notice, there are jewels here for the marker lights, and you have the high-mounted headlight as the post-war version had. Also, here's the other jewel right here. This is the generator for that headlight. A walkboard there. Then you have the beautiful Pennsy number board, which they did beautifully, a little gold around the edge, just like the real one, with the Tuscan red on the inside. Also, take note of the solid pilot, which was put on Pennsylvania Railroad locomotives after the war, I believe, or maybe starting a little before, but mostly after the war. And if you notice, you'll notice all the beautiful crisp detail. If I can zoom into this board here, let's see when. Well, I don't think we're gonna get that. Well, we can't really get that. I'll try to get that in a little bit, but let's go along the locomotive and look at detail parts. Now, right here, this is, I believe, the reversing unit to reverse the direction, and they modeled that beautifully. You have the pop-off valves up here. Pop-off valves right there. And the top of the cab is Tuscan red, just like the prototype. You have 2 little guys in the cab. You got one here, Sorry about that. And one on the other side, an engineer on the right, and a conductor on the left. Or a fireman on the left. But now I'm going to get this thing running a little bit so we can go through some of the detail besides the detail just on the front of this locomotive. So this locomotive is an extremely smooth operator. This is speed step 1. I'm sure I could even get it slower than this, but I haven't really tried. But again, if you notice the beautiful detail parts, we're just going to let the locomotive run by. You have again, the reverser is that big unit in there. You have the main rods, the connecting rods, the pistons and everything. You have the whistle on top of the cab here, or on top of the boiler here, pop-off valves, beautiful cab, engineer. Then you have the beautiful tender that they modeled perfectly with that beautiful slope on the back of the tender and the walls of the tender are a little bent out just like the prototype. Also on the back, they put beautiful jeweled marker lights on. Sorry, right there. Little jeweled marker lights, beautiful detail. You have air hoses and everything. Along with a beautiful coal load, which is just gorgeous. They did a gorgeous job on this coal load. And they've been doing a really good job on most of the coal loads lately. But now I'm going to show you a couple other smaller details. We're going to go into we're going to zoom a little more. As you notice, the paint is applied beautifully. All the boiler bands are crisp. Also, I personally like when a locomotive like this is made out of metal because I think the paint gets a better color. It looks more realistic, and this paint is no exception. Now, Broadway Limited even went to the extent of making the tender die-cast also. Most companies only make the locomotive itself die-cast, and this tender is entirely die-cast, meaning the sound is better, the weight is better, and it looks better overall. Now, I haven't really done that much of a pulling test on this locomotive, but I'm pretty sure it can pull as much as a lot of my freight engines. But since we use this engine as a passenger locomotive, and it was used right up until the 50s, I'm going to hook up some heavyweights to it, 3 Bachmann heavyweights, and then later I'm going to hook up my 9-car Broadway Limited set and see if it can pull that. But for now, let's start with those heavyweights. In real life, the locomotive was capable of running around 80 miles per hour, and right now that's the reason that this engine is one of the only engines that I will run at high speed. Now, the sound, although it's Paragon 2 and unfortunately Broadway Limited doesn't do that much to make it an individual locomotive. They make them all sound sort of the same. It does have a couple cool features. Now, the only real cool feature on the sound department is the whistle. The whistle sounds similar to a Pennsylvania Railroad 3 chime whistle. So it sounds like this. Now, they got that beautiful lead out, which I really like, but unfortunately, when you're blowing the whistle itself, it sounds a little electronic. If you notice, it sort of skips just a little bit. If you listen carefully, here, watch. Now, I wish it didn't do that, but it's not the worst thing in the world. At least this locomotive doesn't sound like some of the old QSI decoders. I'm talking the old ones. In the Proto 2000 locomotives, those sounded awful. I still have a couple. They sound awful. They all sound exactly the same. One day I'll probably get a QSI upgrade chip and make them sound a whole lot better. But back to this engine. It's a beautiful engine overall. As you guys can probably tell, the headlight is not as blue as it used to be, or as previous Broadway Limited locomotives have been. There you go. But you can just notice all the beautiful detail and all of the on the side and stuff. You have the regulator, the throttle, you have all the air pumps. The bell pair firebox is gorgeously done. It's perfect. And everything about this locomotive overall is just stellar. And I would suggest this locomotive to anybody. Now, some people might not like the sound because, again, Broadway Limited's engines all sound about the same. Unfortunately, I wish they didn't. Some locomotives, they put custom whistles on, but that's about it. All the bells sound the same, all the chuffs sound the same, and that's my biggest dislike. 39 will pull the Broadway Limited. As you can see, this locomotive, although small, can pull a whole lot of passenger cars. A lot more than in real life it probably could have. Especially when it comes to heavyweights. In real life, this thing probably maxed out at about 8. At least for one. If you double-headed them, they could pull a whole train. But they were one of the most successful passenger locomotives of all time. Equivalent with the New York Central's J1E Hudsons and the Norfolk and Western's J's. Although not as fast as the J, a very good locomotive nonetheless. And Broadway Limited did a great job capturing the look and feel of such a successful locomotive and such a famous locomotive. I'm glad to own one, and I'm also glad that Broadway Limited finally re-ran them after 8 years of absence. And it was worth the wait. They did a great job, and it is a beautiful locomotive. I'd suggest this locomotive to anybody. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. The reason a 9 out of 10 is because it can pull anything. It looks amazing. All the details there, the painting's perfect. The thing that is losing the star is the similarities between sounds on their locomotives. If they were to change the sounds per locomotive and make them sound perfect, they would be my #1 producer. Which, although I have a lot of Broadway Limited engines, until they start changing the sounds, I won't be getting all that many more. Because as you guys heard from that little sneak peek of the other engine, that's a locomotive from a completely different railroad that has such similar sounds except for that whistle. And I'm sure a lot of you know what whistle that was and what engine it is. Although that's a gorgeous locomotive too, the sound is not there. And if the sound was there, both locomotives would be a 10 out of 10. The other one, you'll see the review on that shortly. I'll see you guys on another Adari Bros production.